Chapter 730. Yumi did her best to suppress the poison with her spiritual energy, all while her mind raced with questions about Beanie. Beanie had been by Yumi's side since she was 12. The two of them had grown up together, and Beanie was one of the people Yumi trusted the most. Yumi could hardly believe that Beanie would betray her. The poison on the dagger was also clearly targeted toward people of sanctuary level. Yumi did her best but was still unable to stop the poison from spreading. She started to feel dizzy, swaying on her feet. Beanie lowered her head, her expression full of remorse. Just then, Sid let out a roar as he charged towards Yumi. He killed the nearest ninjas to her who were protecting her as he glowered at Beanie. At the same time, the ninjas shouted out loud as they threw themselves at Yumi in an attempt to kill her. Yumi did her best to wield her sword, but she knew she would not last long. She was losing spiritual energy as the poison spread, and it would not be long before she collapsed. It was unclear if Wilbur was even alive, and once Yumi went down, the others would hardly be able to hold up against all these ninjas. It was all over. Yumi's men let out a series of furious roars. They battled furiously, fighting their way over to Yumi all their might. Most of them were already wounded. Even if they were more skilled than the Cherry Gladiators, their strengths were literally outnumbered by the massive amount of gladiators out for blood. Just then, Beanie stood at the back watching as the ninjas drowned Yumi and the others. Her expression was distorted with grief, remorse, and hopelessness. Over on Wilbur's end, Cyrus swaggered over with the same wide grin, snatching the ghost sword back with a chuckle. "Go to hell, you fucking lowlife." He brought the ghost sword down against Wilbur's neck. This move was just to let out his anger. He refused to believe that this lowlife had been able to take him down in a duel. To tell the truth, Cyrus would have lost a long time ago if he did not have the ghost sword on him. He did not want to admit it, but the truth was clear as day and it made him furious. Just as the dagger was about to connect with Wilbur's neck, Wilbur opened his eyes. His pupils were clear, devoid of any sign of decay. Cyrus reeled in shock. The ghost sword surged with spiritual energy, going in for a fatal blow. But the Thunder Cleaver let out an enormous rumble, swinging over at the speed of lightning. Cyrus stumbled over a dozen meters backward in a hasty attempt to dodge, but a faint cut still appeared on his chest. Sparks of lightning arced from the cut as a wave of piercing pain spread through his body. Cyrus could hardly believe it. This man had been struck by the ghost sword but was still completely fine. Cyrus even looked suspiciously at the dagger in his hands. Wilbur glanced at Yumi. She and her men were currently surrounded, and Yumi was barely holding on in her state of injury. Wilbur was going to have to take care of Cyrus as soon as possible. He had to admit that he had been careless and the decaying powers of the ghost sword had struck him. The power was strong enough to freeze his movements to a halt for a brief second. It took no time, however, for Wilbur's second consciousness to absorb the decaying power with the power of death it had recently comprehended. The decaying power was merely a subcategory of the power of death. Despite the fact that Wilbur did not understand much about the power of death, his knowledge was still enough to take on the attack of the decaying power. That was what Cyrus had not expected. Cyrus took in the sight of Wilbur making his way over and exploded with rage at last. He could not accept the fact that he had been wounded by such a lowlife. "Domain, infernal prison." Cyrus roared the words, spiritual energy surging out of his body as he and Wilbur were enveloped in complete darkness.